Warning. The following scenes may contain references to power pages and portals which some listeners may find disturbing, especially if you've struggled with poor training in the past. Hey all, Franco Musso here. Yes, I've hacked your podcast feed. I've held John and Mike hostage, but don't worry, I got my wires crossed and I'm actually paying them a small ransom in the form of sponsorship. Anyway, big announcement. I'm finally releasing my online Power Pages course. This has been 5 years in the making. It's tried and tested on citizen devs and portal makers all around the world. It's the course I wish existed when I was getting started. It's practical, it's hands-on, and it's project-based, so you're not wondering how the heck this would apply to the real world. I've built in battle-tested lessons I've learned from tens of successful portal projects across various industries, budgets, and geographies, and I've formulated the most efficient route from zero to heroic launch. The tools and techniques I've chosen to show you are all based on what adds the most value to you, the learner, and to your customers, all in the most compressed timeline possible. Think 80-20, focusing on the techniques that punch above their weight and deliver the majority of results. You'll get video lessons, a repeatable framework, and some super helpful worksheets. Visit francomusso.com/power-pages-course and register your interest. Disclaimer, this course isn't for you if you prefer hours of slides, theory, and little to no action. You can now take your fingers out of your ears and enjoy the awesome that is Sprint Zero.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Sprint Zero podcast. I am joined today by, of course, my co-partner rat in crime, Johnny B. Russell. Say hello, John.
Johnny B. Russell. Johnny D. Russell. Well, yeah, all right.
I'm very well, how are you?
I am good, thank you very much. Are you a little bit stressed today?
Not stressed. I was trying to juggle the kids' bedtime with recording the podcast. I'm now sat in the car outside my own house, so interesting times. It's how all the good podcasts start. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Our esteemed guest today is Scott Durow. Scott is a Power Platform cloud developer advocate at Microsoft. Scott is the brains behind the Ribbon Workbench, which I've personally used quite a bit recently, the driver behind the pro-code, low-code movement, welding together the benefits of both worlds to ensure harmony remains in both camps and we learn from each other. Welcome along to the podcast, Scott. How are you?
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I'm very good. And hi, John. Did you say Johnny B. Russell? Was that a Chuck Berry kind of reference going on there?
Yeah,
a little bit, yeah.
yeah, but except my middle name isn't Barry, it's David. But
right,
that,
okay.
I mean, Mike knows most things about my life. I was surprised he didn't know my middle name. So.
It sounds like my middle name's not Barry. It sounds like a kind of an album from a sort of a middle of a road 80s band, kind of. I always think of whenever I think of Johnny B. Goode, I always think of Back to the Future because one of my big favorite movies of all time. You can see my video. I've got the out of time number plate from the DeLorean.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Very nice, very nice. So thanks a lot, Scott, for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it. So as we always start with the beginning, what we'd like to know is kind of how you started off and how did you get to where you are today, basically.
Goodness, that would involve me talking about myself for a very, very long time because, I'm kind of getting on a bit. This is the thing, when people ask that question, the older that you get, the longer it takes you to answer it, which is a real problem because I don't really like talking about myself. I suppose, I always say that I've just loved growing up with a Power Platform. And I started off as a developer back in the day, back before the year 2000, and we'll just leave it at that. And so I was kind of my first job out of uni was Fortran and stuff like that. Then I was in laser research, so I used to do a lot of industrial installations of industrial laser machines and work on the software control systems, programming PLC and STL ladder logic and making sure that people weren't going to get injured by these huge pieces of granite flying around the place. And
whoa, hang on, you're not Gordon Freeman, are you?
Granite? This sounds very dangerous, Scott.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Danger's my middle name. It's not Barry.
Scott D. Durow. Nice. Scotty D. That's maybe. Can we call you that? Should we call you that for the rest of the podcast?
Absolutely. Yeah, I do. Feel free. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So go on. After juggling granite, what happened after that?
Well, I mean, of course, then the .com boom landed, and kind of got involved with all of that, and lots of procurement marketplaces and all that stuff, and big go live parties in London. Spending more money than people were getting in those kind of startup days. And then, then it all burst. And when we got good grounding, of course, and I was working on like Microsoft technologies and lots of servers, and so working in the early days of ASP, using content management server, in fact, as well as commerce server, and then onto SharePoint. Well, it wasn't even called SharePoint early days, like site server, and then SharePoint after that, Microsoft Office SharePoint server. Doing a bit of infrastructure stuff as well, and then on to BizTalk. Did the first BizTalk 2016 deployment. Got an email from kind of all of the Steve Ballmer was lots of stuff that kind of always in the dim distant memory now. But to cut a long story short, it meant that when Microsoft CRM came out, I was in that space already, and I spotted the whole metadata driven piece, and that was just really fascinated me, because it was like, I've been doing things like a lot with object relational mappers, trying to make it easier to program, making it quicker to manage, and a lot of 4GLs, so things like SQL, Gupta, Windows, Oracle, making it quicker to manage your user interfaces, like forms over data, views over data, that kind of thing. And then there was this product from Microsoft, and it was like, well, it's doing it all, and it's also using all of this Microsoft stack that I love using anyway. So I was kind of hooked, and then the rest of history. I kind of grew up to where we are today. It's all about doing less with more, or more with less. Sorry. Yes, you're right. Yeah,
absolutely.
You know what I meant.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. So, Scott, can you tell us about what your day-to-day is like as a Power Platform cloud developer advocate at Microsoft?
Well, no day is the same. I've found, and that's partly what is quite exciting about it. There's so many different opportunities to getting involved with things at Microsoft, because there's so many moving parts. And the advocacy team is a great team to work with, not only because you get to great work with some fantastic people, like I've got Daniel Laskovich and April Dunham and Eliza Benitez on my team, and I've known them for a very long time, and so I love working with them. But then the team as a whole, the advocacy team is a lot larger than that, so it spreads across everything in Microsoft. So all of the different technologies, and I think I've always felt that software development is software development. It doesn't matter how you look at it. We're all developing software, trying to do the best we can, making it as lowest maintenance overhead, and making it performant as we can, and doing more with less. So it's about trying to be able to look at how can the Power Platform sit alongside all those other technologies, to make a real consolidated picture from the offering from Microsoft. And so I will be doing things like videos, making video content, but I'll also be contributing to the docs, or I'm working on still doing things like open source contributions, working with a product team, raising like bugs, or working through issues I've found, and then giving customers recommendations on how to do things. So it's very, very varied, very exciting stuff.
So you've been with the Power Platform kind of from inception, really. And what would you say are the kind of key game-changing moments that maybe make the Power Platform stand out as a Gartner Magic Quadrant low-code tool of choice?
Yeah, I think that the the thing that makes it stand out for me is that it's not, the Power Platform is not solving just one problem. And actually, I have to say, I have to call it Power Platform. It's Microsoft Power Platform. I've always used to call it the Power Platform. But now we'll work for Microsoft. I've had to start to say it's Microsoft Power Platform. So I have to get the messaging right. Marketing will be onto me. So Microsoft Power Platform, it has such breadth and such depth, and I think that is something that's easy to take for granted when you're working in just one area. But actually, when you look at what everyone's doing in the community, there is so much variance. There is so much. People are doing, like, you look at one project to another project, like different industries, solving different problems. And then you look into how those problems are being solved. And they're still being solved in so many different ways. And some are integrating with Azure or other third-party services. Some are completely doing it entirely within the low-code tools inside Power Platform. Some are doing it with a hybrid extending Power Platform using TypeScript or C#. So yeah, I think that's what really separates it apart from other low-code platforms is how much is there, and not just that there's so much there, but also it's all sitting under the same governance and the same deployment model. And so you can actually look at it as a single solution. I mean, that just is crazy when you think about how much stuff, like you're looking at like desktop flows compared to a Power App or a custom connector, or they're all such different things, but they all sit in the same deployment mechanism, and that's so easy to take for granted, but it's just so awesome.
No, it's right. I've never really thought about it like that. Just how it's a single solution. Yeah, we get that, but like just the amount. I actually think about the amount it can do. That's in that same wrapper. Like that one solution can contain so many different things, and like traditionally, like your RPA automation would just be this thing that's completely separate from everything else in your application stack, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And then you end up having to have different security contexts and managing different secrets, and how do you make them work together, and how do you deploy have versioning so that they all, when you deploy, you don't have different versions, incompatibilities and things like that.
So I mean, when I did my stint at Capita, they had the robotics workshop, the robotics warehouse, I think, and that was all about RPA and how they could use it for different customers, and that was really just like using UiPath to basically copy and text fields from one system to another when somebody called up the council to ask about when their bin collection is going to be, and it started doing that all in the background. But that was like completely separate from the actual the legacy system and then the new system they were using. But yeah, to have it, that's wild. I've never really thought about that. Just having that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I've not thought of it like that.
Yeah,
kind of like you take it for granted a little bit.
Yeah, just like Scott said.
And actually, it's very. Yeah, sorry. It's very. It's quite unusual, actually. Yeah. So let's talk about Ribbon Workbench then. I mean, it's an amazing product, and I know from personal experience and from experience of others that it's got people out of a lot of holes when it comes to Power Platform and Dynamics. My first question on that really is, like, how long did it take you to go from the idea of that to kind of like a mainstream release candidate?
Ooh, because it was all a bit of an accident, really. I didn't really, because back then there wasn't really that sort of notion of community tools. There was no XRM toolbox. There was no. It was all just simply, well, we're just making a bit of code and put it out there, and someone might use it, maybe not, and so I built it very much for my own projects, and so for my own teams to use it, because when the Ribbon XML came out, there was no documentation on it, and we knew that we had to do things that was the same, that we wanted to do things from CRM4. We wanted to add buttons or change button behavior and add some JavaScript. So we had a precedent that we wanted to do. And when you upgraded from CRM4 to CRM 2011 was when it was, there was an upgrade process that took the ISV config file, which was just an XML thing, and then it upgraded it to this Ribbon XML and sort of put these buttons in there. But then you suddenly realized that there was so much more to the Ribbon, that you had to be able to manage scaling, and different sizes had different, you would show and hide different buttons depending on how much screen space, but also overriding the default behavior of buttons, or changing the enables and disable rules, and all this kind of stuff that the Ribbon does back then, but has no meaning now. The command bar just doesn't have a concept of scaling and things like that. So it was so complex that the first version really could only do basic things. It could only just add buttons and override. But I override behavior of out of the box buttons. But I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to make it something. This is going to make you laugh, but I wanted to make it look like SharePoint Designer. I mean, like in my mind, SharePoint Designer back then was the ultimate in tools. Like SharePoint Designer was this thing that allowed you to go in and customize everything. You could just go and override the behavior and add your own functionality. And so I wanted to have all of the functionalities. So I was constantly trying stuff with that Ribbon XML and just saying, can I do this? And just giving it a go. And then as suddenly I found out it does work, then, okay, well, I'll put that into the Ribbon Workbench. So it was a very incremental build. The first version was quite limited. And so I think when I announced it at first, I probably said, oh, well, it doesn't, you can do this, but I'm going to do this more. I'm going to add more to it. So I sort of promised that I had to go through with those promises. But yeah, it was very much like, as projects I worked on needed something, then I would implement it. And the first version was built in Silverlight. I don't know if you ever knew that.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And because I'd done a lot of work with Silverlight. And so it was such a powerful way of building complex user interfaces. And then when Silverlight was deprecated, I had to basically rewrite the thing in HTML and JavaScript.
But did you do that? Did you do that on your own mostly?
Yeah, no, absolutely, all on my own. Obviously working with people to, say what didn't work and this is a problem, and but I didn't have any communication with Microsoft about it, because it was a very much I built it just based on what I discovered worked, and then suddenly people started using it. So the first version probably didn't take me very long. I think probably the first version was just probably a few weekends, really, just writing in Silverlight. But then just kept on adding bits and bits and bits.
That's cool, because it's like a collection of what you've done over multiple projects, and you've added to it over that time. So it's like, yes, it's I would say a way like a really cool like Scott Durow journal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I wish I'd kind of kept more of a log, I suppose, back then, but I didn't know that it was going to become such a big thing. And then suddenly I found it in the Microsoft Docs, and I was like, wow. And I found it in the official course and the exam material. And I was like, wait, how did this happen?
Wow.
I mean, I think you've made it when your tool that you built ends up in the Microsoft documentation. It becomes the standard,
I mean,
right?
I think these days it's a very different landscape, because so many people are making such great tools and the XRM toolbox, and I think it's such a different world we live in, and much better, because everyone is so good at building these things, and people then can discover them and use them. So it's great to see what people are doing.
Yeah.
And how much involvement did you have with the kind of modern command bar editor? I mean, obviously, I feel like Ribbon Workbench was the precursor to that, right? And then when I saw that come out, I thought, well, Scott's got to be integral to this, surely.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking back, it's crazy, but I was given the privilege of actually showing some of it at, I think it was Scottish Summit in 2019. No, maybe earlier than that. But when it was first planned, I sort of showed some kind of hints of what's coming, and I had permission from Casey Burke in the team. And so I had a very good working relationship with him. He's a great guy. And he was sort of asking me about like, so this ribbon thing, no one really knows how it works. You probably the only person that really knows how this stuff works.
Yeah.
Everyone else has moved on. And so, yeah, we had lots of fun sort of unpicking it and going through different scenarios. And of course, I had so many different people talking to me over the years about, can you do this? Can you do that? And the most common scenarios. So we sort of picked through those scenarios to decide on what was the sort of the MVP, if you like, for that first version. And then also looked at, okay, well, what does it need to do in what's the actual final product? How far do we need to take this? And so, yeah, I feel really lucky to have been part of that journey right from the beginning. And it's still a journey, we're still moving, and that's why the Ribbon Workbench is still being used so much, is that there's still things that you do, but it's still being worked on, and that's the great thing. That changes are constantly happening with command bar, and there's not much noise made about them actually. You have to sort of spot the new developments and look out for them, but they're there. And bit by bit, piece by piece, gradually, we're going to get to a point where there will be parity. And, you'll start to see things in the Ribbon Workbench where I will be making updates to say, well, now actually, this you could do going and using modern commanding. Because ultimately, that's what I want to do, is I want to be able to use the Ribbon Workbench as a signposting mechanism. Obviously, there's going to be versioning. There's going to be, like, if you're using on-prem, certain older versions, then you won't get those commanding updates. So that it will need to be aware of versioning, because that's the thing, is that Ribbon Workbench at the moment is the only way you can do ribbon customizations for some versions of the product if it's on-prem.
Especially, I think you can edit the built-in buttons with Ribbon Workbench. Is that right? But you can't at the moment. You can't do that with the command editor.
That's right, Mike. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Scott, do you have a favorite part of the Power Platform? And if there is like a single answer, what is it and why?
Do I have a favorite part?
Or do you love all of your children equally?
Some of them more misbehaving than others, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, you're not wrong there.
Some of them just change the way they look, and they don't let you just turn it off by default either.
Yeah. When I was at school, we used to have this thing where it was like every year we'd do a survey of like the kid who's most likely to end up in jail, and it's...
I'm going with Power Automate on that one. Yeah. So my wife calls Power Automate my mistress,
right?
Because Mike's witnessed it. I have quite expletive moments with Power Automate, but then I also have moments where I'm like, wow, and I still get those moments, and it's the reason why I kind of came into the Power Platform was because of Power Automate. But yeah, Power Automate to me is like a mistress that's going to either bankrupt you or take you to the cleaners or something. That's how I feel.
Yes, it's certainly an exciting journey. Maybe a little bit dangerous and a little bit yes. I'm with you on that. I totally get you. And I love Power Automate and everything about it. The fact that you can have stuff running on servers and you can have scheduled work and monitor it. I mean, I've used Logic apps a lot in Azure, right? So, but to be honest, I just love the fact that it's like Logic apps, but with this amazing management layer around it, so you don't have to worry about all the complexities of Logic apps you do inside Azure. It's some may argue that okay, there's a trade-off, and there's in some areas there maybe you can't have like C# code running inside, but what comes with the benefits is that you get all of that componentization. You can treat them as sort of components that are easier to manage, and desktop flows, of course, as well, for RPAs we're talking about. But I think if I was forced to pick one, And I certainly, because I've certainly got a big history with BizTalk, so obviously Power Automate would seem the logical choice. But actually, I think if I was forced to pick one, it would be Power Apps for sure. And I think specifically Canvas apps, because I've had the most fun in my career with Canvas apps. You can build amazingly powerful user interfaces solving real business solutions with very little effort, and then you can maintain them and you can upgrade them. And if you think about the Power Apps and Canvas apps specifically as an engine, if you think about the history, it's been around. I mean, back all the way back to the app Magic, Project Sienna days. The first version. I mean, if I look at the apps that I built back right then, you can still open them today, and they'll still work. And honestly, I can't think of a single framework, a user interface framework, that you could say the same for these days. There's always breaking changes. So there's something that you're going to have to do to upgrade, to change. And sure, there are parts of the platform that have had deprecations, but there's always like that's actually, if you look at Power Apps on its own, the core of what it runs on, it is just solid as a rock. And the fact that you can build an app in one place and deploy it to mobile, and you can create custom components, and you've got all of this stuff that's managed for you, like security and performance and caching and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I just love all that. And you can build games on it as well, like racing games.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like what the next question is. I mean, that was an amazing segue. I don't know how you did it. So I know you're a keen fan of the outdoors. So if you could create a Power Platform solution that gamifies something to do with the outdoors, what would that be? What would that look like?
Well, I've been wanting to build this app for a long time, and it's a Power App. Because I built lots of applications on model-driven apps. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm a massive fan of model-driven apps, and in fact, it's so much part of me because it's what the first version of CRM has grown up into, right? That metadata, dataverse, table structure, forms over data, views over data, process flows, and business logic, and making it all very, very crazy quick to build complex business applications. It's almost like I feel as though that's just so much part of my core. I don't really think about it in that respect. But I've always wanted to build a Canvas app that can run on my phone, that uses the offline functionality to kind of do sort of like waypoint tracking, race, capture the flag kind of thing.
Nice.
So you can then, because I go hiking a lot in the sort of mountains around me, and there's just no cell coverage at all. It's like it's extreme offline because there is like a huge mountain in the way. Like in the UK, you're hard pressed, right, to find somewhere you don't have like some kind of data connection these days. Wasn't always the case, but in general, you're always getting some kind of low quality, but nevertheless their data connection, unless you go down a mine or something. But actually, that's another good case for it. But yeah, but specifically using the GPS coordinates and plotting where you are, so that it then collects that data offline, and then when you do connect it, then uploads that. So collecting a huge amount of data, and then making sure that you don't lose any of that data, because that's the challenge that ultimately I want to solve, right? Because it's both a technical challenge, but also would love to do it because then you could have say, right, well, let's see who's hiked the furthest or the highest, or or just simply just tracking your hikes so that you've got that data and you can use it later on. I mean, obviously there are apps on your phone that can do that already, and it would be reinventing the wheel to a certain extent, but it's the technical challenge of doing that in Power Apps and using that offline capability to do that extreme data collection and then still make sure you don't miss any of those data points.
So Scott,
offline has just gone.
I was going to say, the that offline capability's just been updated, hasn't it?
Exactly.
So that's definitely going to be a lot easier to do now, I'd say, from what I understand.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, using that whole kind of, it's almost like this, it's based around the model-driven offline profiles. And, that was always the thing, right? The model-driven offline was so much easier to manage than the canvas. So it's much more transparent. And I mean, that was really when I had the idea, was that I wanted to sort of compare to see how hard it would be using the sort of the load save data mechanism in Canvas apps compared to the profiles and that transparent offline mechanism to see, well, do they perform the same? Is there less likely to lose data? It's more robust in one versus the other. It's that. So again, it's like comparing, and contrasting as well as the technical challenge.
Nice.
So Scott, we have a section now called Uncomfortable Corner.
Uncomfortable Corner.
You didn't prepare me for that. I'm really nervous.
Oh, sorry. I
thought really scary stuff, isn't it?
Did John not prepare you about that?
It's just the sound effects. The scream has made me, blood curdling.
So, Scott, when was the last time you felt uncomfortable, whether it was inside or outside of work? How did you feel, and how did you manage to get through it? What did you learn from it about yourself, your skills, your emotions, and what would you do differently or the same if you were in a similar position next time?
Well, it sounds such a cliche these days because it gets talked about a lot, which is a good thing. But, imposter syndrome is real. And I think, I've come to realize throughout my career that more people have imposter syndrome than perhaps people actually let on. And I think it's kind of probably, it can be boiled down to sort of just general insecurities, right? Because we all get insecure. We all, especially in these days of social media where we compare ourselves against others. And I do struggle with that. I mean, I've gone through periods of time where I'll just have to uninstall social media apps from my phone because you look at what other people are doing and you're thinking, oh dear, I should be doing something like that as well. And it seems it seems like an innocuous little thought initially, but it can kind of worm its way into your sort of thoughts and can get worse and worse if you sort of really start to think about it. And I think that's where a lot of the time I do get a challenge, where I see things and I think I kind of set these almost unachievable goals for myself, because I'll see maybe somebody doing this and then somebody else doing that and somebody else doing this, and it's like, you suddenly got 5 people, but you've almost like you've consolidated 5 people's worth of activities into suddenly your own goals. And of course that's, when you think about it like that, it's impractical because you can't do the work of 5 people and try and get to the same level as those 5 people. So I still suffer from that. I still see things and go, oh, I need to do that. But I think I've learned to be kinder to myself these days and let myself off a bit and just say, well, okay, you know what? I'm just going to put one foot in front of the other, and it's fine to have goals, and it's fine to have things and smart goals. We all have to have smart goals. Was it specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely? I think that's what we're told about this all the time, aren't we? And you do strategy planning sessions and in work, especially these days, you're going to say, well, what do you want to achieve in your career and where do you want to get to? And that's all great stuff. But you do, at some point, you do have to accept that it is a guide, and you can't internalize it to the point where you punish yourself. It becomes a stick you're hitting yourself over the head with. It's something that has to be a benefit to you. And the only way to achieve goals, I think, is to break it down into smaller things and then celebrate those smaller things. So I think that's where I start to be more kinder to myself over the years. It's just to celebrate the okay, I did this, and that's a seemingly tiny thing, but actually, I think it's a good thing, and actually, if I keep doing those things, it could become a bigger thing.
And it's interesting what you say there, because about you look at the work of one person, you think, well, I should be able to do that. But sometimes I guess we don't look at how much time that they've spent in doing that, or the help that they've received, and we sometimes internalize it. We should be able to do it all ourselves because that person seems to be able to have done that. Do you think that is something that's quite common in the? I don't like using the term pro code necessarily, because I think we're all developers, whether we write Power Effects or JavaScript or C#. But do you think that's something that's quite common in the coding scene?
Yeah, I think it's common in the coding scene. I think it's common in everything. Because, it's so easy just to assume exactly as you say, Mike, is that, you see somebody doing something, you don't realize how much work they've put into it. And maybe you don't realize how much passion they've had for it, or what the sacrifices they've had to make in order to achieve that, because they've traded off that against something else that they've seen that as more of a higher priority than something else. And so, yeah, I think it's everywhere, and in everybody is that natural tendency just to see the outcome and not all of the work. They say like the swan with looking graceful and beautiful on the surface, but the ugly legs paddling away like crazy underneath the surface. And I think that's in everybody, and that I think we do need to think about that and just see ourselves in everybody else, rather than just sort of putting people up on pedestals. And I don't like it. I find it quite difficult and awkward when people put myself up on a pedestal and they say, "Oh, look at this thing you did, that like whatever, the app or that tool you built or whatever." Because I often think that. Well, yeah, but ultimately, I just prioritize that against other things that I didn't do, and so for everything that I did do, there's a whole raft of things that I couldn't achieve, and you don't see all the mistakes I made and all of the things below the surface that went wrong, and where I was pulling my hair out, and just like you were saying, John, about like cursing because something doesn't work, and then finally the elation when it does work. People only see the elation.
Well, unless you're on a Teams call with me, sometimes you can.
I need to be on those Teams calls.
Mike's been on that. Well, I don't know if you want to be on a Teams call. Yeah. So you're going to say, Mike?
No, I can't remember what I was going to say actually, but it was something really intelligent and thought provoking.
Yeah,
we'll agree. Okay. Yes, yeah, it was definitely.
Well. On that note, I think that's probably all we've got time for today. Thank you very much, Scott, for taking the time to be with us. I'm not gonna say amazing or anything like that, because I know what you've just said. But yeah, thank you very much. So you can find Scott on LinkedIn and his podcast X4M Toolcast. Links to resources mentioned in this episode will be in the show notes. Music today was provided by Ken Like Fit. You can find his music on Spotify, the link to which you'll also find in the episode show notes. Any additional music we've also played, or that uncomfortable corner thing, that's probably going to be in the show notes as well. So be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss the next episode. We would also really appreciate it if you could give us a follow on LinkedIn, and if you're enjoying the podcast, please give us a review, 5 stars, on your chosen powered podcast platform. Thank you very much. This has been Sprint Zero, and we've been Mike Gowland. Say goodbye, Mike, from your lovely car.
Goodbye, Mike, from the Kia.
And Scott Durow. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, everyone from Canada.
Nice. And I'm John Russell. We'll see you on the next episode. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Love you, John. Love you, Scott.
Love you, Mike. Love you, Scott.
Thanks.
Warning. The following scenes may contain references to power pages and portals which some listeners may find disturbing. Especially if you've struggled with poor training in the past.
Hey all, Franco Musso here again. Quick update on that hostage situation. Hopefully the smell isn't coming across the airwaves.
I haven't let the guys use the bathroom yet, so the joke's definitely on me. Anyway, big announcement. So, by popular demand, join me and a cohort of other budding portal makers for live coaching sessions, weekly live training, office hours, Q&A and surgeries. I'll guide you through the process from zero to launch, all at a fraction of the cost of hiring a freelancer or a contractor. It's like having a trusted partner on hand, helping you avoid the pitfalls, saving you a ton of money, headache and time. Plus, you're bound to learn lots from others in the group as we discuss their experiences, challenges and solutions. To apply, head on over to francomosso.com/group-coaching.